Good evening. This reminded me that sometimes it's easier to not have a lot of technology because, less chances for things to go wrong. Way to power through that, Colin. That was awesome. Good job. One time I bought a car, and the car I had before that had power locks, power windows, power, whatever. And it felt like every other month I was having to replace a motor engine, the motor, the electric motor, the window motor, thank you, or the power lock or this. And I was like, golly. So the next car had crank windows. It was a 5-speed stick. Didn't have power locks. It had air conditioning, but everything else. And I'll eat your hat if the lock didn't break. So maybe it's not so true, So I understand we're on Facebook, and this is kind of cool. I'd like to give a big shout out to my dad. My dad turned 72 today. Yeah, I know, what an accomplishment. We didn't think he'd make it to 70. No, I'm just kidding. Well, he didn't think he'd make it out of my teenage years, but we both survived. But some people would say, that maybe it's cruel to say his age, and it's on the internet now or what have you. But trust me, it's payback. Because I can remember when I turned 30, it was just 30, and he sent me black roses for my 30th birthday. Yeah, my sister turned 50 a few years ago, and they had a birthday party. And so I had, family and friends over to my mom and dad's house. And they've got, a big yard, like 2-acre, big yard. He puts a huge sign out front saying, "Have us mercy, Tanya Hogan's 50," And so it's payback, big fella, payback. 72. But you don't look a day over 71, friend. I just want to say thank you to the elders. Obviously I'm not Dave Yasko. He's recovering from the Houston Marathon. I'm just kidding. He just did the half. He just did the half. So congratulations on that, Dave. Awesome job. But I want to say thank you to the elders, especially Lee, because he wanted me to mention his name in my sermon today. You can give me that money later. That's fine. No, but in all seriousness, our message today is going to come from James chapter 1, verse 12. And it reads, "Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial. Having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him." So perseverance is a word that we kind of throw around a lot. And sometimes I wonder if when we throw that word around, do we really think about what it really and truly means? We use persevere. The football games are on today, and I just checked before I came up. It's still tied, and it's not anymore. Bill, hey, you can put your phone away. I'm up here preaching, Bill. Golly. But in sports they persevered through the trial and they got the win, and that is a good use of the word. But when we talk about it from the Christian perspective, I looked up the definition in Webster, and this is what Webster had to say. Perseverance is persistence in doing something despite difficulty or delay in achieving success. Being persistent. When we think about that word even, does it mean being persistent and persevering? Does it mean doing the same thing over and over again until we get a different result? Well, no, because that's the definition of insanity. Doing the same thing over and over and expecting to get a different result. It's like if I had a recipe for brownies and I kept, putting together that recipe for brownies and expecting to get pizza. That doesn't make any sense. But sometimes I think we think that that's what it means to be persistent or to persevere, is to continue to do the same thing, but it's not. So if you consider Thomas Edison, we all know the story about Thomas Edison inventing the light bulb and how it took him 1,000 tries to invent the light bulb. And so someone was asking him and said, well, how do you feel about failing 1,000 times at inventing the light bulb? He said, no, you don't understand. I didn't fail 1,000 times. The light bulb was invented with 1,000 steps. And that's the truth. That's the growth mindset. That's perseverance. That's persisting through difficulty and changing things over and over and keep adjusting what you're doing until finally you get the result that you wanted. When God freed the Hebrews from the Egyptian slavery and took them to Canaan, did they experience setbacks and failure? Absolutely they did. Think of the times where they lacked food and water. And they complained about that to Moses. They complained to each other, and then they complained to Moses instead of seeking out God. God still provided for them. Now, he wasn't real happy, but he provided food for them. He said, duh, I've brought you this far. I'm going to continue to take care of you. They were complaining and murmuring so much at one point that God sent poisonous snakes into their camp, and that these snakes were biting people and killing people. And so they went to Moses and, well, look what you've done now. You've sent us out here, and we're getting eaten alive by these snakes. And he went to God, and God devised a plan that he made a bronze snake, and whenever anyone was bitten and they looked on that bronze snake, they were okay. They would survive. They didn't take the snakes away, but he provided a way out. Okay, and Moses, when he made an ultimate mistake. In striking the rock instead of talking to it to get water. Huge, and it cost him dearly, cost him the trip into the promised land. And then even at the end towards the end of their journey, when the spies come back from Canaan and they said, we've been there and it's just too much. There's no way we can beat these people. It's just not going to happen. They kept experiencing setback after setback after setback after setback, but never did they turn back around and say, let's just go back to Egypt. Now they wanted to. They talked about it, but they never turned around and said, we're done. We're just going back. We're just going back. They kept moving forward, and they kept having to do things differently, and they kept having to learn different lessons. Experiencing failure and setbacks, I think, is something as parents and as educators and as people who are around young people that sometimes we have failed and not allowing children to experience failure and setbacks. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not trying to say, hey, listen, we want kids to fail. I'm an educator. I want kids to succeed. But I understand that sometimes, according to the growth mindset, they have got to experience roadblocks along the way until they push through and persevere to success. It's very important. We have to learn how to do that. I used to be our counselor at the school. I did that for as long as I've done anything in my life as being our school counselor. And I have filled out, I cannot tell you, countless recommendation forms to college. And one of the questions that they always ask is, how does this student deal with failure and disappointment? That's an important thing. It's an important thing we have to teach our kids and walk them through that before they become adults. I wanted to show a video, but I felt like I couldn't really show it because there's just like one word, and I'm like, oh man, really? You just ruined the whole thing for me. But it's a video. If you've ever seen the show Portlandia, and I'm not promoting the show, I've never even watched the show, but that's where the clip is from. And it's got a young man, I'm going to assume probably somewhere around the age of 18, 19, somewhere around there, and he goes to the front porch of a house. He rings the doorbell, and this lady comes, and he says, hey, I would like for you to sign my petition to get rid of plastic bags. And she says, oh, well, tell me a little bit about that. He goes, well, I mean, just sign it. It's good for the environment. She said, well, I really don't want to sign something until I know more about it. Can you tell me? No, just sign it. No, I'm sorry. And she shuts the door. Well, a second later, the doorbell rings again, and there's an older man and woman, and they're standing there, and they said, hi, you just met our son Jeffrey. And we're trying to, and you told him you wouldn't sign the petition. We're just trying to figure out, why wouldn't you sign his petition? She said, well, I just don't know anything about what he's wanting to do. Just sign it. He's a good kid. He's a really good kid. And this thing goes on until, oh, okay, all right, I'll give him another chance. And he comes back and he fails miserably again. And they're trying to talk her into it. Just sign the thing. Please, just sign it. And she says, no, I'm not. And they're done. Doorbell rings again. It's an even older couple. And they say, you met our son and his wife just a minute ago? Why wouldn't you sign our grandson's petition? Now, it's kind of funny, and it's really a lot funnier if you saw it. I can't act it out, and that would be kind of bad if I did too. But if you saw it, you would understand kind of the point that they're trying to make is, how many times do we go and try to bail our children out and keep them from experiencing a setback? We can't do that. Sometimes setbacks and failures are because of some of the choices that we've made, and there's consequences to that. And then sometimes it's because it's something completely out of our control. Could the Hebrews have any real control over whether or not they had food or water out in the desert? Well, probably not. That was something that was out of their control. But then there are times where we make bad choices. Let's consider the future of the church in dealing with disappointment and failure sometimes. Let's just think here just for a second. Raise your hand if you've ever experienced failure or disappointment or a setback. We all have. That's normal, okay? And how do we react when we experience that kind of setback? Well, there's lots of different ways we can. We could freeze up and just kind of quit. Sometimes, I'll be honest with you, that's my biggest fear for myself is sometimes I experience some big hurdles and I'll just kind of freeze up and not really know how to navigate that. We can complain to each other, right? We can complain and I can't believe that this is happening to me and yada, 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 yada. And that doesn't do any good. We can blame someone or something for the thing that's happened and not take any responsibility. Or we could accept responsibility for our part in it. We can recognize what went wrong and try to fix what went wrong or develop a new plan to overcome that, and then pursue and persevere through that and realize that because I failed at that, it doesn't make me a failure. It's not the end of the world. I can survive. I am enough. I am enough. Has anyone ever heard of Brené Brown? Oh man, she's a really excellent author. I would suggest to you, there's a book that she has called Daring Greatly. And it talks, part of the book is about that. Just, I'm enough. And knowing that even though I may fail sometimes, I'm enough. I'm enough because God created me. And then we try to overcome whatever obstacle that's placed in front of us. And like the shampoo bottle says, rinse and repeat. Be willing to try it again. Be willing to go through those steps again and try to figure out what's wrong until we break through and overcome that obstacle. Well, how do we handle disappointment in church or even failure in church? Failure in trying to accomplish a goal. Failure in trying to get out into the community more. Do we quit? Do we give up? Or do we change tactics and pursue the goal in a different manner? In the same way in the church, we can choose to accept responsibility for what went wrong or how things are going and try something different, or we can react negatively. Now, I'll be honest with you, that's hard because it takes vulnerability and honesty to do that. It's very humbling, and it requires us to be open and honest about our faults and being okay with being less than perfect. But I'm going to tell you, I'm a little bit nervous because if we don't equip our young people with that mindset today, when they become leaders in the church, how will they react to disappointment in life and in the church? How will they react when the wheels get shaky? How will they react when they face difficulty? The most difficult part of this process is to completely trust God. And Romans 8:28 says this, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." Now that doesn't mean that everything that's going to happen to us is going to be good. We've certainly seen our fair share of tragedy in the last year. And I don't believe for one second God sent those tragedies to punish us or to make anyone suffer. And it doesn't mean that everything we do will be successful. It does mean that we have to completely trust him in all situations. We have to take things to him and lay them at his feet and trust that God will allow whatever we need to happen. When we suffer disappointments and failures, we should bring those things to God and trust him and be okay with the results. I can remember one time I applied for a job, and I remember sending off all that information that they required, and I remember praying and saying, God, if you want me to get this job, make it happen. If you don't, then then shut the door. If this isn't the right thing. And I had to be okay with him closing that door because that was what was right for me in that moment. I didn't get the job. I'm here at Westbury Christian. I'm in Houston, Texas. Have been for a long time and plan on that to continue. But we have to be okay with whatever God decides in that. And we need to let our children go through this process. We can't rescue them from every hardship. Now, I'm going to embarrass my kids. I apologize in advance, Madison and Drew. Drew just ducked under the pew. I'm just kidding. But when I became head of school, I sat down with our kids. Jennifer and I sat down with them and tried to explain how this was going to impact them. I said, this is going to change your life a lot. And they said, well, yeah, okay. But they didn't quite understand what I was saying. I said, you got to understand, you're going to hear things, you're going to hear people say things about your dad that aren't true. They're going to say some bad things about, some kids are going to say that, maybe even parents are going to say that, maybe even a teacher says something about your dad that's maybe not all that nice. And you have to be comfortable with that. You have to just know that that's going to happen. Be ready to react in a way that's not going to draw attention to yourself. And you're going to have to know that there are going to be times when your friends are going to say, hey, you achieved that only because your dad is head of school. And I can't count on my hands how many times that's happened for both of my kids. And there are going to be times where something unfair is going to happen to you, and I'm just going to tell you, because of my position, obviously if you're being in a really bad spot or what have you, we're going to come to your defense. But there are going to be times where I'm not going to come to your defense because of my position, because I don't want to throw that around. And they said, well, that's not fair. And I said, I'm really sorry. But sometimes life isn't fair, and sometimes we have to navigate that with just knowing that life sometimes isn't going to be fair. Now, granted, I think they've had a great experience, and I don't want to make it sound like they've had this horrible weight on their shoulders with me as head of school, but I just wanted to forewarn them that was going to happen. And I wanted them to understand that I wasn't going to come to their rescue because I wanted them to earn everything that they got. I wanted it to be on their own merit. And I feel pretty good that so far that has happened. Think about this here for just a second. When we allow our kids to go through those setbacks, it's hard, isn't it? Man, it is. It's hard seeing your kids suffer consequences for something that they've done, or sometimes it's something that's not even in their control. How much harder is it for God to allow us to experience that? But yet, even as adults, it's still a necessary process for us to go through because life isn't always roses. How will the church survive if they always react negatively to disappointment and failure? James 1:12 tells us that if we persevere while experiencing trials related to our faith, we're blessed. We receive a crown that doesn't perish. Too many times in life, we confuse earthly wealth or material blessings for a blessing that is to come. God does not always reward us with material things. We are blessed that way, though, aren't we? And I drove here in a very comfortable vehicle. Now I've got power windows and locks and seat warmers. Let me tell you, that is a game changer, especially today. But we are very blessed. But that is not the blessing that James is talking about. It's not talking about driving a fancy car or going home to a nice, huge, comfortable house. Even though those are nice things. We're blessed, but that isn't our ultimate goal. So suffering through these hardships, what is our ultimate goal? What are we really aiming to do? Well, there's several things really that we're aiming to do. These are some goals that I think we have. Continuing to spread the gospel, right? We want to continue to spread the gospel and tell other people that, hey, you're enough because God created you. Loving others. We want to continue to love others and have those opportunities and take advantage of those opportunities. Taking care of the sick, poor, widows, and orphans, right, Coach Holly? We always want to do that. And then our ultimate goal, obviously, is heaven. It's hard saying goodbye sometimes. In this last year, we've seen that happen a lot. And with each person that we've mourned for, Some were particularly hard, but we celebrated because we knew that they had a reward coming to them. Thinking back to the Enron scandal, if y'all remember that many years ago, there was one of the executives that got caught up in that ended up taking his own life. And well, that was a shocking situation. Everyone wondered why would he do that before even anything was proven. I thought to myself, well, this man had been living for that lifestyle, and that lifestyle had been taken away. So everything that he had nothing in his mind. He had nothing to live for. And how sad that is. But we're living for a great and more eternal purpose. No matter what happens to us in this life, if we are living for that eternal purpose, that can never be taken away from us. How awesome is that? Even if we experience failure and setbacks here, that doesn't take away our ultimate reward. Never, never lose sight of that reward, of that goal. Matthew 6:19-21 says this, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart is also." If that's our ultimate goal, even when we make poor choices in this life, we're covered. We have grace. And even when we blow it, even when we make mistakes, we can persevere through that. And we keep our eye on that prize, then we've never lost. We've never failed. Because it's just one more step in our development as children of God. We are imperfect, and that's okay. We are enough. We are enough because Christ died to take away our imperfections. We've discussed tonight that it's okay to experience disappointment as long as we persevere through the disappointment and strive to continue to seek the ultimate goal. This is a life well lived. However, if you aren't living with that assurance, it's a very lonely and scary world. And that failure and those disappointments are very, very scary. So why don't you start off this year, tonight, with a change? Dare greatly to step out, accept responsibility for your past, and have it wiped away. Become a child of God tonight. Also, you may be living for the ultimate goal and walking as a child of God, and you made a mistake. That's okay. That's why we are all in a church building, because every single one of us, according to Romans 3, has fallen short of the glory of God. We all make mistakes. Dare greatly. Confess it to someone and persevere beyond the mistake. That's why Christ came. So tonight, I challenge all of us to not bail people out of their mistakes, or not even bail people out of some of the disappointment that they may experience in life, but help them to persevere through it. Come along beside them. Come along beside them and help them change whatever they need to change and make a difference in their lives. That's the lesson in life that will carry them a long way. And not only that, it'll carry our church a long way. Our church is made up of human beings. That means we're going to disappoint each other from time to time. And if we can't work through that and persevere, then we're going to struggle to grow. But that's why Jesus came. So we would invite you tonight, if you've never been baptized, to come forward. And if you have something that you need prayers for and would like to ask the prayers of the church, that you would come forward as we stand and sing.